What is up, and I welcome each and every one of you back to a brand new Civ 6 or Civilization 6 Deity tips and tricks video. I hope you're all having fantastic days, and if not, I hope I can make your day just a little bit better. We are back. We're going to be looking at 2 tips for each victory types, Domination, Science, Religious, Diplomatic, and Culture. So no matter what victory you like going for, you will hopefully leave from this video a better Civ player. Now, as always, this isn't going to be some sort of simple victory type like, oh, to win a domination victory, kill their units before they kill yours, or to win a science victory, go to space very fast. Like, it's not going to be any of that. It's going to be a little lesser known tips that you might not know about. You might know some of them, but probably not all of them, and you can use these tips for whatever you imagine. Now, let's get started with first victory, Domination. We're going to look at 2 tips for each victory type. We are looking at the first tip, get a joint war. Now, Deity is hard on Domination for the most part, not because the AI is smart, but because they do have a lot of units. Now, it's not too hard if you go for a Horseman Rush and they have some warriors to deal with, but sometimes if they have like an early game unique unit, or if they just decided to build a massive military complex along with ancient or medieval walls early on, it might be a little difficult, especially if you are a newer player. What I recommend is to go to the other Civ that neighbors the Civ you're going to go to war with and get them to join in a joint war against you. What this does is it forces the enemy Civ to split their military within 2, and it's pretty much you're facing half or maybe even less than half depending on what the enemy AI does. For example, if the other AI who you're joining in the war against has a stronger military strength than you, then your enemy is probably going to send more units to their borders, and especially if they end up sieging enemy cities, they'll do the exact same thing. This obviously allows you to use your entire military force to go up against half, or a lot of the times less than half of the enemy AI, and the other thing it helps with is the enemy AI is stupid, even the one you're going to be allied with. They're just going to keep throwing units at each other, and unless there's like a massive technological disparity, they're all going to be they're going to kill a lot of each other's units. So you'll have an easier time blitzing your first enemy, and then by the time you're done with him, finish him off, mop him up, you'll easily be able to go against your former ally, backstab him, and he should have a much weaker military, which should allow you to get 2 civilizations worth of cities in the early game. This is the best strategy for really going for an early game domination victory if you can manage it, especially if you have an early game unique unit. Definitely helps you out a ton and is definitely very, very effective, even though it is a little Cyrus Persia type yeah, it's a little backstab, you know? It's not 6-9 levels of backstabbing, but it is still backstabbing. The second tip I have for Domination is the Blitz tactic. Now, what I mean by the Blitz tactic is to beeline their cities, take him out before the enemy AI can do anything about it, and go from there. Now, you need more advanced military units because a lot of the times you're not going to have more military units, so you have to go for a Horseman Rush early on, or a Swordsman Rush, or a Man-at-Arms Rush. You have to rush into a military unit. That was a tip in my last video I did this, I think. But yeah, Blitz tactics is take your more advanced military, destroy enemy cities, like blitz them completely, and now this helps you with 2 things. Number 1, loyalty. The real limiting factor in a domination victory is loyalty, because obviously the enemy AI is gonna have much more population than you, and if you take their cities, you get a lot of loyalty debuffs. So most of the time, unless you're bordering right on that empire, you're going to be losing that city in maybe 5 or 6 turns if you have a governor. Blitzing enemy cities allows you to take enemy cities before the 5 or 6 turns is up, and eventually will allow you to keep those cities without having to suffer any rebellions. The other thing is, obviously, is that by the time you take enemy units, their industrial centers are gone, their production centers are gone, they're going to have less money per turn, they're going to have less money to spend, and especially if they're at war with somebody else, use the first tip, the joint war tip, they're not really going to be able to do anything to you, because if you've done this right and you have rushed enemy cities, shut up computer, you should have pretty much you should have knights when they still have, for example, horsemen, or you should have horsemen when they have warriors, and the only real struggle you would have is attacking enemy cities, because trust me, horsemen against warriors or man-at-arms against swordsmen is just absolutely despicable, especially if you have enough range support. So what I do recommend is going for a cavalry rush early game, or maybe going for a battering ram, swordsman rush, or man-at-arms rush, blitz the enemy cities down, and then by the time they have a formulated response, they're going to have to attack your cities that you now own, and you have more advanced military units, so you'll have the home court advantage, if you will, which should help you out tremendously. Now that was domination. Let's move on to religious, which is number 2. We have the first tip: get the adjacency pantheon and the double religious policy card, that is scripture and theology. Now, when you're going for a religious victory, obviously the AI will have more cities than you and more early game faith. The way to counteract that is to have better holy sites. If you get, for example, I think it's Desert Folklore, Dance of the Aurora, and then one for jungles. I don't know what the jungle one is, but what it gives you is one faith adjacency for every holy site for each adjacent desert in Desert Folklore, Tundra in Dance of the Aurora, and I think it's Sacred Path for jungles, Sacred Path for the if you have jungles nearby. Now, what this does is you're going to get potentially at least 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 or 11 if there are a few mountains nearby, adjacency with one holy site. And once you plug in the scripture policy card, that is going to double to 22. So what this pretty much does is, instead of getting maybe 3 or 4 adjacency, which would be the maximum you could get most of the time when it comes to mountains and forests and stuff like that, you would be able to get almost literally double that most of the time. Like, as Russia, you're going to be doing it for the Tundra. I just played a game as Giavarman, only Desert Start, which you should definitely check out, by the way, where I got the Desert Folklore Pantheon, and I had double-digit holy site adjacency, which allowed me to destroy a religious victory with just 6 or 7 cities after a horrid start. But yeah, adjacencies are really nice. The more adjacency you have, the more faith you have, and the less cities you will need. And yeah, go to work against the AI then. The second religious tip I have is go for the extra spreads, buildings, and wonders, and promotions. So obviously there are some promotions that give you, Pilgrim gives you 3 spreads and moving adjacent to a natural wonder. Orator gives you an extra 2 spreads, I think. Not only that, but you have, your religious building, the mosque. The mosque gives you extra faith, and it gives missionaries and apostles 1 extra spread. And the Hagia Sophia, again, gives missionaries and apostles 1 extra spread. Again, back to the J. Varman series I just finished off. I had apostles with at least base 7 spreads, and with promotions they could have gotten up to 10 spreads, and I didn't even do that. There were definitely a lot more wonders and pantheons and buildings that could have given me extra spreads, but yeah, go for extra spreads when you're going for a religious victory. It helps you out. Real quick, if you have enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. The goal is to get bigger than PewDiePie by the end of this week. And yeah, make a ton of other content like this. Subscribe and don't miss out. A ton, because it doesn't increase the faith cost, but it increases the value. I think apostles have a base 3 or 4 spread. If you go for the golden age as well, there's dedication that gives you 2 extra spreads for missionaries and apostles. Again, if you could get 9 or even 10 spreads, that is pretty much 2 apostles in 1, and that is, again, it helps you save on faith and makes your units a lot better, just optimizing for a religious victory. That's going to be religion. After that, we are moving on towards science victory. The one tip I have for science is alliances and spies are key. Now, if you get a science alliance, you're going to be getting science from every trade route. Most of the time, you're going to be having 10 or 11 trade routes. You add in trade confederation, you add in some other stuff, you're going to be getting potentially 4 or even 5 science per trade route. That is a lot of science once you add it up. And then obviously, once you get to higher alliance levels, you're going to be getting extra Eurekas every couple of turns. You're going to be getting bonuses towards techs your ally has found that you have not found, which can help you catch up in Deity, especially if you're sort of new. And usually in Deity, you're able to catch up in science by the Renaissance or Industrial Era at the most. But obviously, if you're moving on to a higher difficulty, you're not going to be ideal most of the time. So this does help you add on a bit extra science to maybe help you get in earlier than you would normally would. And then spies, obviously, stealing enemy technological boosts. Upgrade them a few times. By the time they're max promotion, you're going to be stealing maybe every 5 turns, especially with the misanthropism policy card that lets your spies complete missions in half the time. And also Owls of Minerva allows you to do the exact same thing if you do go for secret societies. And yeah, you get 4 or 5 spies. You get 5 Eurekas every 3 or 4 turns. That is pretty damn broken. That's maybe 50% of the technology cost. I think it's 40 or 30% actually of the technology cost, founded just by using your spies. And then the second tip we have for science is multiple spaceports. Now, obviously, you could get away with going for 1 spaceport, but there is some there's some caveats to that, right? A lot of the time, late game, you have all your science and industrial era buildings finished, and you're pretty much just going for useless infrastructure type of things. So why not just build a spaceport, even if it is going to take 40 turns? Because number one, what if you lose your capital to like a nuclear strike or a natural disaster? Or what if the enemy spies just keep pillaging your spaceports Like maybe you're in like a race towards like a space victory and you get your spaceport pillaged. It might be the difference between victory and defeat. Multiple spaceports allows you to do that, like switch over to another city that might not be the best production wise, but is still better than nothing. If you maybe lose your capital city, or if you maybe get a spaceport pillaged and it would take like 10 turns to repair it. Yeah, and obviously the other thing for the multiple spaceports is by the time you launch the exoplanet expedition, having 5 or 6 cities work on the booster parts, like the SS booster parts and stuff like that, will make you finish in maybe 5 or 6 turns max. Whereas if you only have one city working on those like booster parts, you're gonna be finishing in 10 to 15 turns, which is probably like that's probably an understatement at that point. You're probably looking at 15 turns with one spaceport versus 5 turns with another with multiple spaceports. So yeah, those 10 turns could help you get a high score, or they can even help you get a victory you would have otherwise lost. But yeah, that's all I have for science. Let's move on to the penultimate victory type, the culture victory. Now, the first thing I have is pick and choose your wonders. Now, obviously, going for something like the pyramids, the hanging gardens, Etamacani, Great Library, they can all be very helpful early on in the game. The problem is that the AI gets a boost the higher up you go in difficulties, and obviously, everyone is going to go for the wonders. You can only get one wonder per civilization. So picking and choosing what wonders you want is key. The first thing is you want to go for the culture wonders, obviously, right? Early game, there really is no culture wonder that would really help you out a lot. I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain here. I might be wrong, but there really is nothing. You don't really start getting the culture wonders until you get into the medieval and Renaissance era with the Bolshoi Theater, the Opera House, maybe the Sydney Opera, I think it's called, the Hermitage. All those culture wonders are later on in the tech tree. You focus early on getting culture, maybe getting up a religion, getting some science up and running, and then getting those later game culture wonders when you have, an advantage in culture and science instead of a deficit as you do early game. And the other thing is, right, just pick wonders that have a high... It's hard for the AI to get. Now, what I mean by that is the Colosseum, the Great Colosseum, right? You have to have an entertainment complex with an arena, and then you have to have the Colosseum on flat land. That's pretty damn specific, you know what I mean? So that's usually a wonder you can easily go for, but whereas something like the Hanging Gardens or the Pyramids or even Etamacani, you only have to be in either one desert tile or one river tile adjacent to the city, or just one floodplains tile. That really isn't that specific, and 90% of the time, multiple AI is going to be able to go for that same wonder. So again, pick and choose your wonders. Go for the ones you know you can get, depending on, maybe you have a lot of production, maybe it's a specific wonder, maybe it's something like you're super far ahead in culture late game and you're going to go for the Bolshoi Theater. Do that, and so you don't get wonders stolen from you, and you actually do get the wonders you want. The second thing I have is faith and production are just as important as culture output in a culture victory. Back to the wonders, you want production because museums are more expensive, the radio stations are very expensive, and obviously the wonders are very expensive. So getting production, going for work ethic is a very, very good pantheon to get. Not only that, but you also maybe go for a nice industrial zone with aqueducts and stuff like that, so that you have a production advantage when building wonders later on in the game. And even archaeological museums usually... Oh my god, I'm burping a lot. They usually take maybe 10, 15 turns to build. Not even, like 15 turns at the minimum once you just research the tech. And unless you're Ethiopia or Germany or something like that, going for production early on allows you to build those buildings much faster, as well as wonders. And the other thing is faith production. Late game, you need rock bands to win 90% of the time. You need conservations to win 90% of the time. Those guys both cost faith, and they cost an increasing amount of faith depending on how many you buy. So, getting holy sites earlier on, sitting on a stockpile of 10, 20,000 faith will not only help you with that, but it'll also help you with patronage and great people. For those of you who don't know, you could go into the great people screen, and then you could, instead of having to wait for the great people points to go up, you can either spend gold or faith to buy that great person. Usually faith is a lot cheaper, and while you could go for gold, and gold is a kind of important in a culture victory, the fact that faith is used for rock bands and it is used for the national parks is very, very important. More important than gold in my opinion. So yeah, faith and production are very important, and pick and choose your important wonders. That's the culture victories. Now we got diplomatic victory. Diplomatic is 2 as well. Number 1, culture is key for a diplomatic victory for really one main reason. Envoys are found exclusively in the civic tree. Governments allow you access to more envoys as well, because, for example, the chiefdom, you get like one envoy in like 100 turns. The political philosophy, like autocracy, 2 envoys every 100 turns. Then after that, Merchant Republic, and those tier 3 governments are like 3 in 150, and then it's like 4 in 200 turns. So yeah, every envoy you're going to get is either in a tribal village or a wonder or in the civic tree, which is why culture is very, very important for a diplomatic victory. After that, Statue of Liberty late game strategy. Now, the biggest problem with a diplomatic victory, and one of the reasons I don't like it, is because once you get to, 18, 19 diplomatic victory points, once you're close to victory, everybody, all the enemy AI, will use all their diplomatic victory points to vote against you and try to make you lose 2 diplomatic victory points. Now, there's a way to get around that. You vote for yourself to lose 2 diplomatic victory points, and you win that resolution. So you're going to get 1 diplomatic victory point for winning, and then make sure you win the other resolutions, and then you'd get, for example, you'd win 3 victory points and lose 2 victory points or something like that. But this other strategy is also pretty nice. Statue of Liberty strategy. So the goal here is to get 16 diplomatic victory points and then hard build the Statue of Liberty, maybe even use Gustav Eiffel, which is pretty good historical accuracy. Get the Eiffel Tower, get 4 diplomatic victory points, and use that to victory. I'm not a big diplomatic player. I just don't like the way it is, because you can't go for an early war. You take an enemy capital, you get a diplomatic hit. You use coal or non-renewable resources, you're going to get a hit to diplomatic victory points. You need city-states, which is kind of cutthroat earlier on in the game, and you need those envoys for diplomatic victory points. Diplomatic favor. It's all diplomatic favor. But if I was going to go for a Diplo victory, the Statue of Liberty strategy, 16 Diplo victory points. Use Statue of Liberty to get the last 4. Boom. You've won. Real quick, though, we're going to go for one last bonus tip. This bonus tip is going to be used for every victory type, except for maybe diplomatic victory, now that I think about it. The bonus is classical era warfare. Go for a swordsman, go for a battering ram, or just beeline a horseman. And if you go kill 1 or 2 early enemy civs, maybe use some of the domination strategies early on, you're going to have more cities to get religious settlements. You're going to have more cities to get campuses and industrial zones. You're going to have more cities to not only build wonders, but also more theater squares. And I guess diplomatic, you get more culture, so eventually you'd be able to, I don't know, especially if you don't take the enemy capital, I guess a diplomatic victory could be boosted by this strategy. But classical era warfare, get an enemy civ or 2 early on, and then you could probably win at least 90% of any victory you want to go for. That's going to be it, though. If you have enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe. It definitely helps me out a ton. And yeah.